Well, the spiritual truth that I'm working with today is where my attention goes, my life flows. You've heard that before. I don't really like soundbite spirituality, but sometimes it's helpful to me to be able to just have a little phrase that gets stuck in my head. Where my attention goes, my life flows. If I keep my attention on how hard life is, how unfair it is, how I can never catch a break, my life will flow in that direction. But if I can keep my attention on what I actually want in my life, what I want my life to look like, and I sprinkle a little gratitude over that vision, then my life will flow in that direction. Sound simple? Yeah. And the truth is that most spiritual solutions to everyday life challenges are really simple, but we make them hard because we fight them. As most of you know, I'm doing a series on a powerful little book called The Art of Abundance, 10 Rules for a Prosperous Life. And you know what? If we could embrace fully and begin to understand deeply these 10 rules in our life, we would begin to understand that that's God's operating system. It's a map to how God operates for our own abundant good in our life. It would give us prosperity in money, in friendships, in new ideas for our projects, and new health in our life. The first rule, you may remember, because you know I don't speak every Sunday right now. We're going every other Sunday or so. So a couple of Sundays ago, we did the first 3. The first rule is that be one with life. It's a non-Sunday way of saying, it's the secular way of saying, be one with God. Now, the trick here is that you are already and forever one with God. No sin you've ever committed, no so-called sin you've ever committed, no mistake you've ever made will revoke your oneness with God in this life. So taking this step a little further, if you believe you live in an abundant universe is another word for God, there's no reason to suggest that you are not one with an abundant universe. In other words, we really don't have to go anywhere to find prosperity. It's all around us. What we have to do now is to uncover prosperity, be observant of it, and then participate in it. The second rule that we looked at is be aware you live in an expanding universe. Spirit has created an energy for us, and we mold that energy into whatever it is that we want to make manifest by right of our own consciousness. That's rule number 2. The third rule is be accountable for your consciousness. So we spent a whole week on this. We're going to dive a little more into this even concept with today's rule, but just as a reminder, you only have this moment in time, so don't waste it. Don't waste it about what you were worrying about yesterday or what happened when you were 18 years old or 5 years old or 10 years old. Stop wasting your time on those memories. Don't waste your time on worrying about what's going to happen 10 minutes from now or next week or in 5 years. Be present and know that it's your responsibility to keep your consciousness free from negative litter in your life. Today's rule is number 4, be focused. Be focused. Consolidate and direct your creative energy by mastering the power of intention. You know, a lot of our class work, what we do in our classes, and I hope those of you who haven't taken foundations will take foundations, because you will really begin to understand and know how to work with this idea of intention. It's powerful in our lives. Now remember, Dennis Merritt Jones, who wrote this book, broke his lessons down into 5 parts: the premise, the problem, the principle, the payoff, and the practice. The premise of rule number 4, which is be focused, is that our mind is the most powerful ally you can have in creating an abundance of purpose, meaning, but it needs direction. Your mind needs direction, and by direction I mean conscious direction. Without conscious intention pointing the way, the mind is left to its own device, and it may create abundance, but it may not necessarily create the abundance that we desire. The operative word here is conscious intention. It's important to remember that the universe doesn't judge our ideas. It doesn't judge our beliefs. And it simply says it doesn't go into good or bad, right or wrong. It simply says, yes, it agrees with whatever belief you have, and it will act on that particular belief. It doesn't say, oh, that belief isn't worthy of you. It will just say, yes, that's the belief you have. We're going to act out your life in that belief. It acts upon them indiscriminately. But here's another important thing I found in reading this book, and that is this: our minds must create. Just take that into contemplation for a day. Our minds must create. And if we're not intentional in describing what we want and believing in what we want, we could end up with abundance of lack and confusion and a lot of disappointment. So we know the premise is to stay focused on what we want. Let's move into the problem. We lose focus because we're so distracted on daily dramas in our life, in the comings and goings of our life, in the doings of our life. And some of those distractions are caused by loving people and well-meaning people. Maybe, for instance, you're focused on staying off sugar to increase your health abundance in this life. And you go to work on a Tuesday morning, and a guy you're really fond of comes in with a whole plate of cupcakes that he makes. And you look at the cupcakes and you see he's put those nice little sprinkles on that you like so much, and they're all chocolate cupcakes, so nobody gets one. It's just a great plate. Now, you've already gained your intention to stay off sugar a while to help your life. But you like him so much. And you don't want to disappoint him. You don't want to hurt his feelings. So your commitment to stay off sugar wanes in your desire to make sure he feels appreciated. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just what is. And what happens is you've taken your intention off your health and you've put it somewhere else, a distraction somewhere else. See, a lot of times our focus is derailed by memories or commitments that our parents made when we were very little. Sometimes the parents are even gone to their next realm, but we have taken those comments and those remarks and we've turned them into beliefs, and we've settled them deep inside of ourselves, even those we've worked with. For instance, my mother would always say frequently, maybe 3 or 4 times a week, Georgia, you're like a bull in a china shop. And as a result, I've begun to believe that. And even now, I notice sometimes trying to make myself smaller when I would actually make the world better and myself better if I was just my authentic self, my intact self in my life. Some of the distractions that I know people in my counseling practice, if their bank accounts gets a little small for a minute or two, that can be a tremendous distraction in our life. Sometimes it's your middle child, for instance, may not have gotten into the college that he wanted to get into, that he was really hoping he'd get into. And now he just goes in his bedroom, shuts the door, and night and day he plays video games. That's a distraction in our life. Maybe you went to the doctor and the doctor saw a little lump and said, well, you know what, I'm going to watch this for 6 months. Who wants, that's a 6-month distraction in our life. Perhaps part of the answer is to focus on doing fewer things and do them more mindfully. And remember, I just want to keep saying this over and over and over again. Mindfulness is not some superior spiritual practice. It is simply the practice of keeping your mind and your body and your heart in the same place at the same time. The power, creativity, and productivity of a focused mind is honestly beyond measure. The problem is the unfocused mind is equally powerful. If we're not paying careful attention to our intention, our mind can become the master rather than the servant of what it is that we want. So in a nutshell, the premise is we need to put our attention on our intention. The problem is we give way to distractions in our lives that pull our attention away from our intention. I don't know about you, but I've said, and I've heard other people say, I don't know how I keep attracting this into my life. Whether it's a person or a situation that keeps repeating itself, it's different body, different name, different location even sometimes. But the outcome is always the same. I keep attracting this same thing. If you hear yourself saying that, it's time to begin to look at where your distractions were in your life. If you want an easy, powerful spiritual principle, wind up every day just making a short list of what distracted you that day. Where were the distractions in your life? Because I promise you, they are keeping you from fulfilling your intention. So we've covered the premise and the problem. Let's move on to the principle. There is an organizing intelligence that permeates every single one of us and every other living being on the planet. There is an organizing principle and intelligence that permeates every single one of us. And when it permeates us, it compels us to grow and express the essence of all life. Some of us call that organizing intelligence God, but you can call it whatever you want. But call it. Call it frequently. Call it all the time. We can't dismiss this organizing intelligence from our lives, but we can't ignore it. It's why understanding the principle of rule number 4 is not enough. Just understanding it won't work. We have to embrace it with the kind of faith that gardeners have when they plant tulips. In the book, he uses an example of a gardener planting a tulip. And what he says is the gardener has to have focus. He has to know what kind of what colors do I want my tulips to be in the spring. He has to have focus on where in the garden, where's the sunlight, where's the soil that will help these tulips grow. And then when he plants them, he doesn't go out and try and dig them up and see how far along they are getting ready to come through. No, he leaves it. He believes in the organizing intelligence. The gardener has knowledge and faith as well as faith, but the organizing intelligence didn't just turn off the lights and go home. The organizing intelligence is with us and operating through us all of the time. So we've looked at the premise and the promise and the problem and the principle of rule number 4. Let's move on to the practice. If I were to attach one word to the practice of rule number 4, it would be repeatedly. We have to repeatedly practice this. Practice all the time. Because the belief in not enoughism is ingrained in most of us. In fact, I suspect a portion of it is ingrained in all of us, in our individualized mind. And when we return our attention to our intention and focus on the principle of abundance, in other words, there's enough for everybody. We don't have to worry. We don't have to hoard. We don't have to be jealous. We don't have to wish other person didn't have something because that means that we can't have it. They can have it, and we can have it as well. There is enough for everybody. Ernest Holmes, our founder, in this book is quoted, and I just want to read you a paragraph. This is from Holmes himself. That which thought has done, thought can undo. Lifelong habits of wrong thinking can be consciously and deliberately neutralized, and an entirely new order of mental and emotional reaction can be established in mind. Merely to abstain from wrong thinking is not enough. There has to be right thinking. See, what he's saying is that it's not enough to just get mad at yourself for thinking thoughts that aren't helpful. You have to put in thoughts that are helpful right behind that. Jones goes on to say that the conscious mind is essentially monophonic, meaning you can only think one thing at a time. See, we think we can multitask and do a lot of things. We can do a lot of things, But our mind isn't on what we're doing because we can only think one thought at a time. And you know what? That's great news because it makes learning how to focus your attention on your intention much easier. Most of us have heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out, and we know exactly what it means. With awareness, you can begin to consciously monitor what you're thinking and identify those thoughts and beliefs that no longer serve you. But you know what? That's not enough. After identifying your wrong thinking, as Holmes points out, you have to put another thought in its place and move on. Let it go. You really can't undo a life of undefeating thoughts. And we've been taught that. You can't undo a life of undefeating thoughts. But what you can do is neutralize them. Put in a new thought that will serve you. But it takes commitment. It takes practice. And as I've done with the first 3 rules, I've asked Rosie to type up the practice, the actual spiritual practice for this rule. It's out there on the little square table as you leave. I encourage you to take it. Again, this is a simple solution to those of us who want more abundance in our lives, whether it's abundance of money or abundance of health or abundance of friendships or whatever it is. We can have or an abundance of compassion, an abundance of any positive state of being that you want, you can have, but it's going to take practice. Next week, Reverend Rignon will bring us a wonderful message, and after that, I'm going to take up the issue of rule number 5, because I think even though these are part of a string of rules, each one of them, if we only did one of the 10 things in the next 6 months, our life would change. And that's what this church is about. Change your thinking, change your life. But in order to do it, we have to practice what it is that we're being asked to change. Because these beliefs in lack and limitation and not enough, they're deep in most of us. And they're at least shallow in all of us. So it's time to get rid of them. Let's take this message into prayer, knowing that there's only one power, and it's the power of love. And it runs right through me if I will just let it. Abundance runs through me if I will just observe it and let it in and then let it out again. For nothing stops here. The law of circulation runs through me, whether it's love or money or peace or joy or anger and unhappiness. It all runs through me. So I'm conscious now what I choose, and I give thanks for that, for the universe to always say yes. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is. If you